Thank you for taking this interview with us, and thank you for being here. Is it the first time that you're in Israel?
No, it's actually the third time.
The third time.
I was here in 1964.
Okay. What did you do then?
I was on a student tour that my grandfather paid for after my bar mitzvah. And I went to a number of European countries and spent 4 weeks in Israel. And I was here in 1987, and now I'm here again.
Okay, and the second time?
Second time was a group of 7 of us in the financial area who came on, I guess, what you would call a mission.
Study tour.
and met a lot of people in the business community, including the Prime Minister here in Israel.
All right. I will not ask you about the Israeli economy, obviously, but does Blackstone have any plans to do business here from now on? Have you done business here? Have you looked at Israeli firms before? What are your plans for Israel?
Well, we've looked at some investment opportunities here, and regrettably, we weren't the high price payer in those. We have an open mind on looking at things in Israel. There appears to be a lot of changes occurring here, and from a regulatory perspective, that may make more companies and assets available for purchase.
Yeah, well, specifically yesterday a bill was passed in the parliament that might force some of the business group in Israel to sell some of their asset, possibly some financial asset. Would you be interested in buying local banks or local insurance companies?
I don't think the financial area in particular is a good one for us. We tend to take control of businesses and use some type of leverage, and financial companies typically are highly regulated and already have leverage on them. So it's not an ideal type of purchase for us.
So rather you a company like yours would prefer industrial companies or service companies?
Yes, exactly.
Good. So I'd like to hear some of your views and opinion on the global economy just now. It seems to be running fine in some places, not so well in some places. I understand you've been quite a lot in China. We'll talk about the scholarship in a minute, and things may be cooling there. What's your view on the global economy in general and the QE and whether it can stop without crashes?
Well, in terms of the global economy, as you mentioned, it's quite regionalized. Europe looks like it's having very significant difficulties growing. I think it's probably near a bottom, but it's got longer-term challenges, and we don't take an optimistic perspective on European growth. If it happens, that's good. At the moment, on balance, it's close to flat, and will probably remain so for the next year or two. The U.S. is doing relatively well. We're growing this year probably in the States around 2.5%, maybe a tiny bit less, but that's in the face of a drag of 1.5% from tax increases and spending cuts by the government. So the underlying aspects of the economy in the U.S. are stronger than they appear. Housing is up for the first time in years. The number of houses being built is about halfway back from the bottom to where it used to be on a normalized basis. House prices are up 10% after going down or being flat for 6 years. So housing is a source of job creation on its own, but it also is the largest asset of most Americans, and so that helps confidence when housing prices go up. We've got an energy revolution going on in the United States where we're becoming, over time, energy self-sufficient. That's a real source of strength. Our auto businesses are up to 15 million builds a year, up from 8 million at the bottom. So that's a huge increase. And then we have our technology businesses where the U.S. has a source of real strength, as you know. Israel has that too. So we've got some real positive trends in the economy. Our biggest problems tend to be government regulations.
Right. What do you think about the current policy in the United States? A different policy could have achieved better returns, better growth?
I think that's the case. And, we've had a complex adjustment after the crash. Our financial institutions are in wonderful shape. So that part of our recovery was handled well, but we have a huge regulatory overhang. We still have not finished our regulations, for example, in the financial area. And that'll take more time, and that puts uncertainty into the economy. We have a variety of additional uncertainties in tax policy, both for corporations as well as for, individuals. And so these types of major open items, if you will, make it hard for people to commit for plans. We also have a new healthcare initiative in the United States, which makes it uncertain exactly what the cost of workers is going to end up being.
Mm-hmm. But is it the actual policy that's the problem, or the uncertainty? I understand uncertainty is a problem whichever way you look, but are the policies wrong? Would you have recommended a president different policies? Well, such as taxes, such as all this regulation, maybe less taxes, maybe deregulation, I don't know.
There's obviously an interplay between policy and regulation, and I would have done a number of things differently, but that's perhaps for a different interview.
All right. How about China, since you've spent some time there?
Yes, talking about Asia, which you asked about other parts of the world. Asia's slowing down a bit. China, when it was at max expansion, was growing at 10, 11% a year. It's now down to about 7.5% according to their reported numbers, although it may even be a bit slower. I think one thing to understand is that China still has enormous resiliency, even though it has slowed a bit. And the new government there is pivoting its economy from an export-driven economy into developing more of its own internal economy. It's going to move more to a service economy than an export economy. One of the reasons that's happening, of course, is that its wage rates are going up a lot, so it's not as cost competitive. But the government wants the wage rates to go up so people become more affluent. Yep. And the reason for that is that China per capita is only 100th in the world in terms of its income. Mm-hmm. They think of themselves as a poor country. The rest of the world looks at China with its $3.4 trillion of foreign reserves, currency reserves, and thinks China is a rich country. And so there's a basic dichotomy there. And China will go its own way, but it will continue to grow. Other economies there are slowing down a bit, India in particular, down to 5% now from what was at the top, 8%. Inflation is up. Their currency is weaker. So we're seeing a bit of a slowdown from Asia, an increase from the U.S., and flat from Europe.
Are you not worried that the QE policy of buying bonds to the sum of over $80 billion a month, when this stops, might rattle the markets and maybe, I don't know, bringing some bad markets behavior?
Well, at some point it will definitely stop, so we don't need to debate that.
Yeah. What would be the
only
effect
question
of that?
is when and how, and it'll probably be gradual rather than just one moment they stop buying. The U.S. labor force is growing, but not at the rate any of us would really like. The Fed has a relatively optimistic view of what will happen. Maybe they're right. They're not always right based on empirical data. And I think the markets, which are always difficult to predict, understand that this is going to happen at some point. It's been a little, I guess, over a year. One thing to understand about this whole program is when the crisis started in 2008, the U.S. Federal Reserve was quite a small institution. It had only approximately $800 billion of assets. Citibank, one bank out of our 7,000 banks, at that time had approximately $3.6 trillion of assets. So Citibank itself was 4 times the size of the Federal Reserve System. So when the Federal Reserve says it's going to be buying $85 billion a month, and its assets now are up to over a little $3 trillion, it's not a completely unbalanced position for the Fed to be in. So I tend to look at that and try and put myself in the head of the people who run the central bank, which is always hard. But I think they'll be quite cautious and not feel they're under pressure to truncate a program before it's time or to do it in a way that destabilizes markets. There'll always be some volatility whenever you have a significant change. But I think that the markets will be able to deal with that.
So you sound quite optimistic looking forward. I'd like to go to something a little bit different. You run the most well-known private equity organization. What is the magic of private equity that allows leaders like yourself to produce extra returns? What is it? Is it the management? Is it taking companies out of the market and out of the public eye? Try to give me the magic dust.
Well, it's pretty simple. First, when we buy something, we typically get legally inside information. We sign a document, and all of the company's plans are turned over to us so that we can analyze it correctly. And we do that in cooperation with the management. So that's one significant advantage for return. We actually have real information as opposed to public information, which is not complete for an analysis. The second is we have control. So we develop a new plan for the company. If we can't put together a plan that accelerates growth and makes it a better company, we don't buy it. Third, we have a different incentive structure for the management where they own a significant part of the company so that their desire to make this good outcome happen is aligned in terms of interest, perhaps more than just running a public company. And then we put leverage against that so that if we earned exactly the same rate of return, despite all these things, that we should get a higher return on our equity because of substituting debt for equity. When you put all these 4 factors together, it would be surprising if we couldn't significantly out-earn the stock market. And if we're any good at picking companies, in addition, that should help. So at Blackstone in private equity, we've averaged around 1,000 basis points, which for a regular reader would be 10% more than the stock market return. So if the stock market averaged, like 8, 9, or 10, we'd be 18, 19, or 20.
Over how many years is that?
Oh, this would be over almost 30 years.
All right. Yeah, that's very impressive. And do you still find what to buy?
Well, it changes, because what happens in finance when you do something and it works, there's no patent. So other people try and do exactly the same thing. So it's a business of continual innovation. And so we're currently doing a lot of investment in oil and gas and energy generally. That type of thing, sometimes you can buy at book value. Sometimes you can just start a company to do those types of things, so you're not paying the high premiums for buying a, quote, normal company. You don't tend to have competition for those types of investments. And we've tended to do extremely well because you also need specialized expertise. So you're constantly in the investment business trying to run away from what everybody else is doing, but not do something that's silly just because you're running away from what other people are doing.
So you have to reinvent yourself every so much time.
Well, in fact, it's actually a bit of a strain because you have to reinvent yourself constantly. And what we realized is that and in the latest 5-year period, 70% of our products are in areas that we weren't doing before. So you have to be continually alert. You have to understand macroeconomic trends. You have to not be scared to do different things and have different emphasis. In real estate, we're constantly going in and out of markets and geographies. We've averaged 1,600 basis points, or 16%, over the stock market in real estate. It's clearly one of the best performances
I
in the world.
I understand you have bought an incredible amount of houses, actually.
Well, we about a year and a quarter ago, we made a judgment that the U.S. Residential real estate market, where there were a lot of foreclosed houses and difficulties, had probably hit bottom, and we started buying individual houses one at a time.
From banks?
From banks in foreclosure or at auctions at the courthouse after houses had been foreclosed on. An average price of about $175,000 a house, which is not that much in the United States in terms of a high-priced house. And we're now the largest owner of houses in the United States. We've got about $5 billion worth of houses, 30,000 houses, something like that. We found that the timing happened to be good. We were renting these houses to people rather than selling them because a lot of customers are still under significant financial pressure, so it's easier to pay the rent than it is to put up a 20% deposit for the house. So there's a very vigorous rental market. And in the markets that we've bought in, house prices have gone up around 20% in 1 year. So we've also applied borrowings against those houses. So if the value went up 20% and you get rent, this is not such a bad outcome.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to ask you a sort of political economy question. It seems that some economies, including the United States, are going a little bit to the left, some kind of socialist capitalism or something like that, looking after and talking a lot about closing gaps and income gaps between rich and not so rich, etc. Do you think it's the right direction to go? Do you think it foster growth?
I think it's
Where is it going?
I think it's a response to globalization. And what's happened is that there have been a lot of economic dislocations around the world as globalization has moved supply chains to lower cost locations and left a lot of the Western world, developed world economies with a knowledge-based economy where not everyone is qualified or at an advantage to do that. So what happened as a result of that is that disposable incomes for what you would term in the United States the middle class have not kept up over the years because the economies of the world have changed, which means that these economies are going to have to reinvent themselves. They're going to have better education. And that gap takes a while to change. In the meanwhile, there's a variety of frustrated people who haven't been able to keep up economically and want things to change. There are no instant solutions. There are solutions that come through education. And as a result of that, along with the financial crisis, that the shortfalls in the budgets of countries have to be made up in some way. And the people in the middle class, which are the largest number of individuals in a society, typically in the developed world, basically say, well, please don't take any from me because my income has not kept up. And that leads to a reaction to move tax increases and other types of things to the group in society that's benefited more, and it's a phenomena that's global and not just limited to the developed world. You're seeing that in India. You're seeing it
Brazil these days.
In China.
In China.
And so this is a global phenomena. And
are we going to see more of this? More of these frustration, demonstration, unrest? Or is that the peak, sort of?
I think it's a tough call. And I don't know the answer to that. If the economies pick up, then you should see less of that. If economies soften, you will see more.
All right. Tell me about your scholarship and what is it and why China?
Well, I've set up the equivalent of the Rhodes Scholarship, but instead of taking, in my case, 200 students a year to Oxford, I'm taking them to Tsinghua University in Beijing, China. And the reason for doing it is to create leaders for the future. These are all super successful students who will be successful in any case. But what I'm interested in doing is exposing them to China for a year, get a master's degree. It'll be taught in English, which is the global language.
In business? Is that a degree in business?
No, it's not a degree
Whatever
in business. The students will have a number of different areas they can study. And what I'm interested in doing is attracting potential thought leaders in students who will go into politics, who will go into business or economics, who will go into the media, go into academics, and go into not-for-profits. And the objective is to have them have a very unique experience in China right after they graduate from undergraduate, and be able to go back to their own countries and explain to them what China's like. Because China, in all probability, will become the largest economy in the world. And it's an alien culture for most countries outside of China. And as they become more economically successful and more powerful, unless the rest of the world catches up with their growth rates, there's going to be antagonism that grows because no one who's growing slowly thinks it's their fault. It must be someone else. And if China ends up as a winner in the global economy, then they will be the subject of some of that frustration, anger, and envy. And it's important for the global system to be stable, that those types of frustrations don't get out of hand, because they could end up with trade tensions, economic tensions, or military tensions. And we're already seeing some of these elements occurring between China and Japan, China and the EU, and what the hope is that the שוורצמן scholars, who will be 45% from the U.S., 20% from China, and 35% from the rest of the world, from the largest economies in the world, will be able to serve as a bridge, interpreting China to their population, and also going backwards. And when China is doing things that really are annoying the rest of the world, be able to talk to people there. And there'll be 10,000 of these students who graduate from the program over a lifetime. And 10,000 super achieving students spread around the world who have a much better knowledge of China can't be a bad thing. And that group in the modern world with the internet, so they can stay in touch with each other all the time, can also act together on other issues that'll affect an increasingly globalized world. So that's the vision.
All right, so thank you very much. Your team is making me all kind of signs. That's great. Thanks for coming to Israel, and good luck with the
Well,
scholarship program.
Thank you very much, and thanks for interviewing me.